It's okay. Om mani padme hum. 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 It's okay. It's okay. It's okay.
What does it mean, Om mani padme hum?
Om mani padme hum. It's the mantra of compassion from the Buddha called Avalokiteshvara or Chenrezig in Tibetan. He's not coming. She's not coming. So when you say Om mani padme hum to animals, you're actually they can hear the mantra, and it means that in their next life they will probably not be reborn as an animal. You're giving them that mantra, and if they hear it, then next life they could possibly be a higher rebirth. So they're stuck now, animal realm, he's stuck as a snake, about to be killed or eaten by anybody, but maybe next life a little higher rebirth. So every time you see an insect or an animal, if you say Om mani padme hum, you're wishing for them to have a better rebirth next time,
Your American name is Kethy, and
Yes.
your Buddhist name is Tendron.
Tendron.
Tendron. We are in Madison, Wisconsin, around Madison, Wisconsin, in Oregon, in a place that can, by how it looks like, probably be placed in some kung fu movie, or people would think that I am traveling Tibet right now, or some other Buddhist country.
Right.
But we are not that exotic. We are in Madison, Wisconsin, in a Buddhist temple. So for the beginning, can you please tell me a little bit about this place? Where are we? What is the name of it?
We're about 10 miles south of Madison, outside of a town which is called Oregon, and we are in the middle of the Wisconsin countryside, and the name of the place is Deer Park Buddhist Center. It's actually a monastery and a Buddhist center where lay people can come study. So there are monks that live here, and there are geshes that live here. Geshes, the word geshe is an equivalent of a PhD. So people who have a very high level of education in Tibet and outside of Tibet live here. We have 2 geshes. And then this is summertime, so we have our summer course going on. Every year we have a summer course. And our visiting teacher is Jangse Chöje Rinpoche, who came from India. Actually came originally from Tibet, but he lives in South India at a huge monastery there called Serajay. So everyone here, the monks here, the geshes here, are basically from Serajay Monastery, which is a Gelugpa sect monastery. There are 4 major sects in Tibetan Buddhism. Gelugpa is this one, and then there's also 3 others, Nyingma, Sakya, Kargyu, and this is Gelugpa. So you'll see, sometimes they wear yellow hats, and it's called the Yellow Hat Sect, because they wear yellow hats sometimes.
Okay. So specifically this place, when is it built and by whom?
Oh my, it started out, Geshe Zopa was teaching students in Madison, Wisconsin. Actually, he had a house, and we would meet in his basement, and that's where the classes were. And then he invited the Dalai Lama to come and give the Kala Chakra initiation in 1981. And we started to look for a place to rent for the event. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama sent word, his office sent word that he thought we should buy a place. He said, you would probably want it for later, a historic place. It'll be a historic place. So everyone spread out looking for land outside of Madison. And Geshe-la found this spot, 13 acres, and this is where the Kala Chakra happened in 1981. So he bought it in March, and we built the temple in about 3 months, and then the Dalai Lama gave the Kala Chakra. And it's built up from there. That was 1981, and then in 1986 we built the stupa back out in the back, the white structure. And in the meantime, other buildings were built to house monks and guests. And then this building was started in 2006, I believe. It might have been 2005, 2006. Geshe had decided that we needed something bigger than the Kalachakra temple, which could only hold about 40 people. And many Tibetans were moving to Madison. And at that time, there were probably 500 Tibetans already in Madison. So he wanted something big enough to hold the Tibetans as well, and more people. So we started fundraising, and then they started building in 2006, I think, and they got it complete enough in 2007 that the Dalai Lama could come and do the initial blessing. And then in 2008, it was really complete. And then His Holiness the Dalai Lama came back and dedicated this temple. So this has been here completed since 2008. The throne was right in the middle, and all the monks sat around him, and then we all sat out here in a big tent. 1,200 people sat out here under this big tent, and he taught for 3 days. He gave Kalachakra in July 1981.
Tenzin Gyatso.
Tenzin Gyatso, 14th Dalai Lama. Yes. And then 3 years, let's see, that was 1981, and then in 1986 we started the stupa to commemorate the Kalachakra. And this took us 3 years to build this. So we started at the very ground part of it, the very bottom of it, of that box, we put all kinds of implements of war, swords, toy aircraft carriers, airplanes, knives, shotguns, all kinds of things in the bottom there, on the very bottom layer.
On the bottom of this thing.
And then we suppressed it. That's to suppress violence. So you put all these things of violence on the bottom, and then you suppress it with incense, ground up leaves of cedar, all kinds of things to suppress it. So everything that came on top of it suppressed violence to stop war. So that was the reason for the bottom layer. And then we started with layering up different things we use in our lives, in our regular lives, like clothing, telephones. Geshe told us to bring what we work with. So I brought a telephone because I was always working on the telephone. The people brought rakes, hoes, computers, anything like that. 1981, not many computers. But we put all those things in the first layer. So this is called the worldly wealth layer right here. And we could not leave 1 inch of space. We had to pack it. So every time we put something in, Geshe would say many prayers over it, consecrate it, and then we would put all these things in.
How would you suppress it?
With incense, we had mounds of ground up incense and cedar. So when we put things in, we would put buckets of cedar in and push it down. So there was no space at all. This was supposed to be really fully packed, really deeply packed, no space. And then on the very top of the worldly wealth section, we put really nice, beautiful cloth, saris, silks, jewelry, worldly things that are beautiful, very beautiful. And that was the top of the worldly wealth section. And then we capped it. And it was winter, so we had to leave it alone till next year. And then we started the next section, which is where we put all the Dharma things. The books, texts, statues of the Buddha, all those things. So it was kind of like working on the teachings. So first you start with the worldly wealth section, then you go to the teachings, and then up in the very top, we put relics of great masters, bones and things like that, and more and more texts and very sacred things, and then all the way to the top where it dissolves into emptiness. So actually, right in the middle of it, there's what we call the central spire, the central channel. And at each spot on the channel is a big long stick. And we painted it red, and then we painted mantras around it all the way. And then at different places on it, we tied prayers in a big bundle and tied it up and put it where in our human body the chakras are. Crown chakra, forehead chakra, throat chakra, heart chakra, lower chakra. So at each one of those places on that spire, we tied prayers. And that went in first, and then everything else came around it. So halfway through building this, we realized we're building a structure, but we're actually building a symbol of our own bodies and our own lives. Because we start with the worldly wealth, we have to make a living. We have to suppress violence first, then we have to make a living. And we use things to make a living, tools and things. And then we have to study and learn the Dharma in order to go to the higher chakras, the heart chakra. The heart chakra is right about in there. and then up to the higher chakras. So all the way up, it's representing not only the enlightened mind and how to get there, but how we use this body and mind to get there. It's a very interesting process. So every time I look at a stupa now, I know what's inside. Every stupa is filled like that, from the worldly wealth to the teachings to the Dharma, higher and higher up to enlightenment. It's really great. So when you look at a stupa again, you'll know what's inside.
Well, I would never tell.
Yeah, you can never tell what's in there because it's all sealed, closed, very tight. Yeah, and they have these all over Tibet, but we don't have many in America. We have maybe, I don't know, 10, 12 in America. Not too many.
How many monks and nuns live in this place?
Well, only monks here, live here. It's a monastery. Nuns don't live here. Some of us live across the street at a guest house. Some of us live in our own places. But the monks that live here, I think there's four monks and 2 geshes, so 6 altogether.
6 altogether. Mm-hmm. And how does daily life for them looks like?
They're busy. It's a big place to keep up. They work all the time. They're always working either on the land or the yards or the snow shoveling or all the things that they do to keep this temple up and the other buildings and take care of the 2 teachers so that they cook for they cook for themselves and the teachers. They do many, many prayers for people. So sometimes you'll come up here and they will be here doing Tibetan chanting, Tibetan prayers. Oftentimes they'll do it for someone who's sick or for someone who's died. So they do prayers for people who have passed away. And they do different prayers, for different people, request things of them. They have many things for the Tibetans here now. They have, at least twice a month, the Tibetans all come and they do prayers with the Tibetans for prosperity and health for everyone. Prayers to help everybody. prayer flags?
Prayer flags?
Prayer flags. They each have a prayer on them. They have prayers printed on them. And the prayers are for for everyone to be happy, healthy, prosperous, to have everything. These are prayers that are printed there. And then when the Tibetans believe when the wind comes and lifts them, the prayers go all over the world.
Oh,
so the prayers are always going all over the world.
Medicine also became known as a place where Dalai Lama visits pretty often, we can say.
That started because of Geshe Sopa. Our teacher here, the founder of Deer Park was Geshe Sopa. And he actually was part of the people who, one of the Geshes who asked the Dalai Lama questions on his final exam. So there's actually a movie of him in Tibet asking the Dalai Lama questions at the final exam. He knew him in Tibet.
For people who don't know about Buddhism, what is the final exam?
Well, you study, the monks study from the time they're 7, 8 years old and all the way up to about 22 years old, sometimes 26, 27. And then they go for finals for their Geshe exam. And that's the exam that he was doing, his final exam. For the
But doesn't Dalai Lama getting to be chosen as a young boy by the science of incarnation?
Yeah.
So once when they choose him, that's him, correct?
How did they know it was him?
Yeah.
Well, a couple of things happened right after the 13th Dalai Lama died. His body turned to the north, the head turned to the north, and moss grew on the north side of the columns in the temple. So there were some signs right when he died of where he was going to take rebirth, north. And then there's a lake in Tibet where they go to look for visions. Certain people go there and look for visions. And the vision they saw was of a red-roofed house in the north, in a place called Amdo. Maybe it was a turquoise roof. I can't remember the color, but anyway, they saw a house. And they saw the letter Ah. And so they thought, okay, maybe that's Amdo. Ah, for Amdo. Amdo is like a state in the United States. It's like a province of Tibet, an area in the north. So they had several names, and they were pursuing each name. And the search party that went to the north to look for him in the north, they'd heard of a child who was very special, and they proceeded to go see him. And when they came up to the house, there was the same colored roof that they were looking for. And they had changed clothes. The monks, the geshes, the high lamas, had changed clothes with the servants. So they were wearing the rough servants' clothes, and they were leading the horses, and the servants were actually dressed like monks, and they were sitting on the horses. So when they came up, it looked, the wrong people.
Yeah.
The geshes were in plain clothes, dirty clothes. But yet this young boy ran out of the house and called one of the geshes by name. He said, "Oh!" He came right up to him and said, "You're here to get me," or "You're here," And so he recognized someone from his previous life. So that was the first hint that he might be the man. And then they set out certain things that he had used in his last life: canes, glasses, I think dorje and bell, ritual instruments. And he picked the right one. They set out they all looked the same, but he picked the right one that was his.
How many Dalai Lama? This is the 14th one, right?
14th, yes, this is the 14th.
So pardon me for asking this question as somebody who is not a Buddhist and doesn't know much, but just theoretically speaking, because position of Dalai Lama today in the world is very difficult. He's a leader of a nation that is occupied by a very powerful country.
Right.
Politically, he has a very big responsibility in political life, and then he also has a big spiritual responsibility for many of his followers. And what would happen if the 15th Dalai Lama says, just theoretically speaking, if the 15th Dalai Lama would say, "Well, I don't think I'm the guy for this job."
No, he wouldn't do that. He's always going to be up for the job. I mean, the Dalai Lama really is a living Buddha, and he has perfected every quality we would ever want to perfect in our lives. If you ever meet him, you'll realize he's just amazingly strong, confident. He's just so friendly, so ordinary, but so extraordinary. He's total love and friendliness comes right at you when you meet him. And so he's always going to be up for whatever job is ready for him. But he has said there may not be a 15th Dalai Lama. He has said that.
Why did he say that?
I'm not sure. I think he didn't want people to. I'm not sure. I don't know.
Tibetan Buddhism specifically is different than other ones by having a Dalai Lama, if I'm not wrong. Right?
Yeah, right. Although the Pope is close. Think about the Pope. Really, the Pope has been the Pope for many, many generations.
But not by incarnation, they just choose one.
Yeah, they choose one, but...
Yeah, it's not the same thing. But this Tibetan Buddhism is very specific in that way, always looking for the next Dalai Lama. So, a little bit ago you said it's one of the 4 sects
yes,
in Tibet. How do sects get along? I'm asking this because as a Christian, when you say sect, it usually doesn't mean the good news.
Along, yeah. I think it's very similar to American Protestant religion. You have the Presbyterians, you have the Baptists, you have, but they all have the same belief basically, but they just have different prayers, a little different songs, different hymns, a little bit of different, but they all believe in the Bible. They all believe in Jesus Christ. So it doesn't really matter which flavor they are, if they're Presbyterian or Lutheran or whatever. And it's the same thing, I think, with Tibetan Buddhism. They all share the same basic belief. They just have slightly different methodologies and slightly different ways of getting at it, but they all have exactly the same belief. So there isn't there's no fighting disparity going on. It's like the Presbyterians don't really fight with the Baptists. Same thing with this. They were very good.
In the terms of going to each other's temples and attending services, that...
They do it sometimes, but I think both in Tibet and now in America, they really are sticking to trying to maintain the purity of their own lineages. So they really don't do a lot of visiting other ones because they're really intent upon keeping theirs as good as it can be and keeping passing it along to the next generation. So there's not a lot of sect things going on, but it's because they want to keep their own belief system, their own traditions pure, and not diluted by something else.
How long are you in Buddhism?
I started studying in 1975, and I came here to study with Geshe Zopa in 1977. My first teachers were Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa, who are from Tibet, but also have established a monastery in Nepal. But they've traveled all over the world establishing centers. So they came to America in 1975, and that was the first time I ever Tibetan Buddhist teachings. It was very strange because Lama Yeshe started talking, and I thought, he's saying everything I already believe, and he calls it Buddhism. I already had a very strong belief in reincarnation. I had a very strong belief in karma, that the kinds of acts you put out.
For people who don't know, what actually karma is? It's even a word that is getting used today by people who don't even
know anything about what it means. Yeah.
So how would you explain it to them?
Well, karma actually is translated as action. Karma is action, or to act. And karma, or sometimes it's translated as cause and effect, causes and effects, or consequences, that our actions have consequences. So every act we do has a result, and that's karma. So when we act negative, and it all starts with the mind. First it starts with the thought, I'm going to hit that guy. I'm so mad at him, I'm going to hit him. And it starts with the thought, and then it turns into a physical action, and the act of harming someone happens. And then there's going to be an effect from that. There's going to be a result from
Punch
that.
back.
Yeah, it could be immediate, or it could be next week, or it could be next life. I mean, karma goes lifetime after lifetime. So perhaps you knocked the guy out and you didn't get hit back, so you haven't experienced the results yet, right, of your negative act. But maybe sometime you're walking down the street and somebody comes up and clocks you one. You're experiencing the result of your act, because nothing ever happens to you that you didn't create the cause for.
But for random people, you don't realize that was caused by something you've done a long time ago.
That's why it's so important to understand karma, because we always act without thinking about what's the effect going to be. We're always acting from anger, or sometimes we're acting from love, and we're very kind and helping someone. And then we're going to experience the effects of that too. We'll experience love toward us later, So it's both good and bad. Karma, it's certain, it's true, whether you believe in it or not, it's going to happen. And there's always going to be an effect for every act. So we never get off scot-free, There's always going to be an effect.
Isn't one of the goals to break the chain of...
Yes, that's exactly the goal, to break the chain of karma.
How do you break the chain of karma?
Well, first, by realizing what it is, that your next act, whatever act you do, is going to have an effect, and then stopping negative actions and only doing positive actions. So you stop the negative results of coming, so you stop your suffering. I mean, really, the results of negative acts are going to be suffering that happens to you, So if you can stop those kind of results happening to you, you can have a much happier life and lives in the future. And also, they say that the real ending of karma is when you realize what Buddhism calls selflessness. We think there's an I here. I think there's a person here. I think that there's a person here, We think that the I exists. I, Kethy, I'm here.
Ego.
I exist. The ego, right? We exist through our egos all the time. I'm going to go get something to eat. I'm hungry. I'm thirsty. I'm unhappy. I'm happy. There's always this I at the center. And one of the key teachings of the Buddha was, there's no I. There's no self there. We think there is. There's a conventional self that does exist. I'm made of flesh and bones. I have language. I can see. I can hear. The senses make up a conventional self. But ultimately, there is no self. There is no I. And if we can realize that, then karma stops. Then we don't have the ego driving every act we do, because We don't have that selfishness anymore. We don't have that self-centered, I, me, I want this, I want that. You know?
Would one of the ways to break chain of karma be a forgiveness?
Yes, I think so. Because that would be a great act. It would be a pure good act, forgiveness.
Do people talk about forgiveness in Buddhism the way they, or as much as they do in Christianity? I think it's more over there, but...
I mean, the forgiveness, it's different with Christianity because you're actually making a prayer to God to forgive you your sins.
Or you're forgiving somebody else the
Right.
things they done to you. Back in the example of a punch, and
Yeah.
somebody punched me, but I forgive him. I don't want to punch him back.
Right.
So I don't have anything with that person anymore. There's no bad feelings. I just
Right.
forgive.
Just forgive it, yeah.
Because humankind used to do eye for eye, tooth for tooth for many years. And then somehow forgiveness came in.
That's excellent. That's really excellent, really. And you felt better, right?
Yes.
I would think that would be the very best thing to do, is to learn to forgive others. And just earlier when we were sitting there listening to the teacher, he was talking about that very thing, not retaliating if someone said something bad to you, called you a bad name. He was saying, to stop that, stop hatred, stop the return with hatred by with tolerance and patience. And in that tolerance and patience is forgiveness, not keeping an anger toward them for what they did. Yeah, very key.
Simply speaking, what is the procedure for somebody who decides I want to become a Buddhist monk or nun?
Or nun? Yeah. Or like my...
Yes, like yourself.
I think the procedure is really different for everybody. It's very different.
Is there any formal thing they need to do? Is there any process?
Well, the formal thing you need to do, first of all, you have to have a teacher that you totally trust, that's been teaching you for a while, and who knows you. And then, in my case, and I think in almost everybody else's case, when you made the decision or the wish to become a nun, you ask your teacher. You go to your teacher and ask, would you ordain me as a Buddhist monk or Buddhist nun? And the teacher will either say yes, or they'll say not yet, maybe a few years later, or they'll say no. They hardly ever say no. They usually say a little later, let's see, because sometimes people are all very excited about the idea of being a monk or a nun, but they haven't really thought it out, how they're really going to live. Because there's very few places, there's no nunneries in the United States. There's no place for Buddhist nuns to live. Monks, there's a few places like this, but not very many. So in the West, it's an almost impossible task. But you ask your teacher, and in my case, I asked Geshe Sopa for 15 years. I asked him every year for 15 years. And he would give me a reason every time as to why it would be difficult. And I think he was training me to get used to the difficulties that would happen once I became a nun.
What would he say? For example, what
he
would be
say,
difficult?
and he said this several times, he said, you'll be like a white crow, and there is no such thing as a white crow. Crows are all black. If there's a white crow, in the West here, he would say, people see me, I'm Tibetan, I'm Asian. They see me in monk's robes with a shaved head, they know, because I'm from Asia. There are monks and nuns in Asia. But he said in the West, there are very few people wearing these robes with shaved heads, Westerners like me, Americans. And he would say, so the Westerners won't accept you, and then the Tibetans won't accept you. Back in Asia, they don't know what to make of you because you're an American who's got a shaved head. He said, and no one will understand what you're doing, and they will despise you. They will look at you funny. They will try to walk far away from you, get away from you. They will not like you. And that's how all happened. People look at me very strangely.
Once when one becomes a nun or a monk, what happens to previous life?
Your previous life? You mean the other things I used to do?
Private property you used to own, friends you used to have, memories.
Oh, my friends were all Dharma friends, so I see them all here every day. I see all my friends, a lot of my friends right here. Most of my friends are Dharma friends, but I think that's the other part of it is you can't just become a monk or a nun out of nothing. You have to have a background in Buddhism, and you have to have a community behind you that's going to support you and understand what you're doing. Otherwise, it's very hard for people if they just become a monk or a nun and then they just go off back to their regular lives.
Does it happen at all?
They go back to their regular lives?
Yeah.
It used to happen more. It doesn't happen much anymore because the geshes, the teachers, the Dalai Lama who ordains people every year, they're becoming very careful about it. Because they found that people would get ordained and then they'd just go off and they'd never hear from them again. They didn't know what happened to them. But now you have to have a place, you have to tell your teacher or tell the Dalai Lama where you'll be for the next 2 years. You have to have a place to go, a nunnery or a monastery, a Dharma center, someplace that there's going to be Dharma that will support you and hold you. They used to not do that, but now they totally require it. So people mostly do that now. They found that 70% of the Westerners who were ordained in the last 30 years have disrobed.
70%.
They became ordained and then they gave their vows back because they couldn't do it alone. They go off to some place and not have any support, not have any friends, nothing. And they just couldn't do it. So it's very important to have a place to go and have a Dharma center or teachers to go to. You can't just fly off somewhere after you've become ordained and then try it alone. It's very hard.
Did you ever have a chance to go to Tibet itself?
No, I wish I had. I lived 1 year in Sarnath, India, which is a huge Tibetan, the Tibetan Institute of Higher Studies. So there were about 500 Tibetans studying there. So every day I saw many, many Tibetans and talked with them. And I was studying Tibetan language. And then I got to Nepal. That's the closest I got. It was Nepal. But I never got to Tibet. I hope to go someday. Before I die, I'll go someday.
What do you think is going to happen with Tibet in the future?
I don't know. Things are bad again. They go through cycles where they're very harsh.
I heard from the one monk, because I was in this place once before, and I had a chance to briefly chat with the monk. He said they have difficulties when they go back. They have to come in jeans or normal clothes.
Yeah, they don't dress as monks. Yeah, they come in jeans, yeah. Because the Chinese government that is over Tibet is ruling a lot of everything, they're taking over everything. And right now, I think they're back to a harsher regime now. Sometimes they relax it a little bit, and then they get hard again. I mean, it just goes like that. And right now we're in one of those bad periods where they're making it very difficult. And Tibetans now, I heard, can't even come out of Tibet because the Nepali government is turning them back to Tibet. That's very dangerous.
Nepali government?
Yeah, they used to let them across the border there. They don't anymore. So they can't get out. They're stuck.
Wow.
Yep.
So for the end, if somebody would decide to become a Buddhist nun today, what would your message for that person be?
Oh my gosh.
You've been in this for how long? Over 30 years?
Yeah, I've been studying
for over 30 years.
About 40 years, yeah.
So you do have a lot of experience. What would be your advice then?
Well, I haven't been a nun for that long. I've been studying for that long, but I became a nun 8 years ago.
Oh, okay.
So I haven't been a nun for very long.
Well, still, what would be your message?
Think carefully before you act. Think very carefully about why you want to do that and what you want to do with your life as a nun, as a monastic, because you need to have goals for why you're doing it and what you're going to do next. It makes no sense to just become a nun and not to think about those questions. If you really answer those for yourself in a very strong way, in a very true, authentic way, not to tell yourself any stories, oh, it's going to be so great and all that. It's very hard, and it makes you stand out from people a lot. And so be ready for people to think different things about you than people don't usually think about people when they're walking around looking normal. But when they see people in robes and shaved heads, they have strong feelings. Sometimes they're very negative. Sometimes they're very fearful. So be ready to be kind back to them. No matter what you get, be ready to face the world with a very friendly way and love everyone and not retaliate when somebody says something bad to you.
I think actually the way the most Western people heard about Buddhism and monks is through martial arts. And
you're right.
we know they are practiced in Buddhist temples. Do you practice them here at all?
No.
But they say that meditation and practicing of those can even reveal certain almost mystical powers that some monks have them, such as, I don't know...
Flying?
Well, they say that too.
I know, I've heard that.
Reading other people's minds, knowing the future,
Yeah.
or simply unbelievable body things, such as being exposed to low temperatures in Tibet. And
Yeah.
have you ever seen something like that yourself?
I haven't seen it in Tibet or outside of Tibet, but I've certainly heard about it, and I've seen films of it, where the monks develop this inner body heat so strongly that the way they test it is they go out on a very cold morning or evening, and they have sheets that are wet, and they put them on their bodies, and they see how fast they can dry them with their heat, the heat of their bodies. So these monks who are out there practically no clothes at all, in freezing sub-zero temperatures, and they're putting these wet sheets on them, and then perfectly, drying them within minutes. So I've seen movies of that, and I've heard of that. And I've heard of different powers, people having clairvoyance. I think some of my teachers have clairvoyance.
What does that mean?
Being able to read your mind. I think several of my teachers have that. I feel like they've read my mind a couple of times, more than a couple of times. But flying, I've heard stories of monks flying across valleys in Tibet. Those are all powers that I've heard come with meditation, a lot of meditation, a lot of mind over matter, stabilizing and strengthening the mind so that it's stronger than matter, than the body. So it defies the laws of gravity and all that. But that's not what any of them are meditating for, or that's not what they're supposed to be meditating for. Sometimes people are going for powers, but the Buddha always said, powers are not important. The most important thing is to tame the mind, to do good acts, to not do negative acts, to tame the mind. That's what the Buddha said. And he wasn't all about, meditate and you'll have some great powers. He never ever said that. He always said powers are not important. In fact, they're very worldly. They're just another part of something we want in the world, more desire, Oh, I want to fly. Just another desire, and it's not transcending the world in any way to have those powers. And they could come in very handy, obviously, to read somebody's mind could come in very handy. But if you use it to help people, that would be worthwhile. But if you just used it to read people's minds, it could turn very negative. It could turn, unless you have pure heart, unless you have a really good heart, and you've developed your heart and your mind so it's very strong in love and compassion and wisdom. That's what they're really shooting for, not powers.
Well, thank you so much for this conversation and for giving me the opportunity to visit this place.
Well, thank you.
Thanks
for
a lot.
asking me questions. Thank you.